Dust moved slow through the evening air, swirling in golden threads, as the sun bent low across the roofs of the little town. Heat lingered on the planks of a street, and in the long shadow of the saloon steps sat 4 children, quiet as stones, their faces turned to the dust. Their boots had holes worn clear through, their clothes sagged on thin shoulders, and their silence was sharper than any cry. In that hush, the town could hear the ache of them, but no door opened, no hand reached. The world simply went on, as if their hunger were just another piece of the day, no heavier than the rattle of wagon wheels or the creak of swinging signs. The eldest, Lydia, tried to keep her back straight, though her frame carried the weight of 2 parents gone. Her father had been crushed under a horse gone wild on the ranch. Her mother carried away by fever not 2 months later. With no kin close enough, the 4 of them had slipped into the cracks between pity and disdain. Lydia's hair was tangled but her gaze fierce, though she cast it down so folks wouldn't see the fire there. Beside her, Eli pressed his lips together hard, trying to look strong for the little ones. But every cough that rattled his brother Sam's chest cut through his pretense. June, the smallest girl, clutched a rag doll, whose seams had long since unraveled. She whispered to it like it was alive, as if secrets could hold them together when nothing else could. The children had gone to the store first. The shopkeeper, Mr. Dillard, shook his head and muttered that his ledger was already full of debts. "Not my responsibility," he said, shooing them toward the door as though they carried plague. They stood outside the church after that, waiting for the preacher's wife, who gave them a folded hand and said only, "The Lord provides." But no bread was offered, only the sound of bells ringing somewhere far away. Later, when Lydia knocked on the door of a neighbor she'd once seen laugh with her mother, the shutters closed in her face, leaving the smell of stew leaking through the cracks. The air itself felt heavy, thick with rejection, thicker than the August sun. They became the talk of the town, though never in ways that helped. Women with baskets whispered of burdens. Men leaning on fences muttered about how orphans grew up crooked. The children felt those words like stones thrown from shadows. Even when they were not spoken aloud, they could hear them in the shifting silence, in the way folks' eyes slid away. Across the street, standing with his hand resting on the saddle of his gray horse, a man watched. His name was James Colton, though most called him simply Colton. He had carved his life out of long days and lonely years, working cattle and land that stretched further than most men's patience. A widower with no children, his house sat quiet as the plains at dusk. Folks said he had riches and cattle, but his heart was hollow, as though loss had hollowed it out and left only a shell. Colton was not known to meddle in other folks' business, but as he leaned in the shade and watched those children huddle together, something inside him stirred. Lydia shielding Sam from the dust, Eli squaring his thin shoulders like a man twice his age, June whispering to her ragged doll. These small acts burned into him sharper than any gossip. He said nothing. He only watched. The town spoke of him too, and their words traveled faster than dust. Colton's got more cattle than sense, but no kin to pass it to. A man like him takes strays in, and folks will think he's desperate. Children like that'll drag a man down. He heard those voices carried by the wind, but louder still was another voice, one buried deep, the memory of his own boyhood hunger, after fever had swept through his parents' cabin. He remembered standing small and waiting for someone to care, and how long the waiting lasted. He felt shame rising in him now for standing idle, but shame alone did not move a man, not when pride held the reins. Lydia, stubborn and weary, tried once more. She approached the bakery, her hands trembling as she asked if perhaps there was a crust too old to sell. The baker's wife gave her a look that sliced and said, "Child, we cannot feed every stray." The door closed, leaving Lydia to swallow tears she would not let her siblings see. She tilted her face to the sky, whispering to her mother, somewhere beyond the clouds, "I'll keep them safe, no matter what." That vow weighed heavier than her small frame, and yet she carried it like a stone she would never set down. Colton turned away then, his jaw tight, and walked to the well. When he returned down the street, a canteen slipped from his saddle, as if by accident, landing near the children. Eli picked it up, suspicious eyes darting toward the man. Lydia made June drink first, then Sam, and finally took a sip herself. When she looked up to thank him, Colton only tipped his hat and walked away, as though kindness were a thing to be hidden. Later, they found a bundle of bread on the steps where they sat. Eli scowled, muttering, "The loneliest man in the county, that's what they call him." But Lydia noticed something different. When June fell asleep that night, she was wrapped in a coat too large for her, smelling faintly of dust and leather, the kind Colton wore. He had left it without a word. The days passed, each one strung tighter with whispers. Laughter drifted from saloon doors about orphans who won't last the winter. The cruelty of it pressed like a hand on Colton's chest. He kept his distance, but every night, his eyes found them by the well, huddled beneath stars, shivering even when the wind was still. Something inside him cracked further with each sight, until silence itself became unbearable. One night, as lanterns burned low and the town slowed into shadows, Colton stepped from the edge of the street. His boots struck the dust in steady rhythm, his figure moving toward the well where the children sat. Lydia pulled Eli close, June clutched Sam tighter, and their eyes went wide. The townsfolk still awake turned their heads, watching through windows, whispering from doorways. Colton stood before them, his face lined with years of weather and grief, and his voice came low but steady, cutting through the hush. "All of you," he said, pausing as if the words themselves carried weight enough to break him. "Come with me." The children stared, disbelieving. Lydia's lips parted, but no sound came. Eli froze, unsure whether to trust or flee. June's eyes filled with tears as she pressed closer to Sam. The night held its breath. Colton knelt then, lifting Sam into his arms with the ease of a father long denied the chance. He held out a hand to June, who placed her small fingers in his without thinking. Lydia met his gaze at last, and in it she saw not pity but recognition, one soul carrying the burden of another. Slowly she rose, taking Eli's hand, and they stepped into the lamplight with him. The whispers followed them, "Fool, desperate man. Orphans will ruin him." But the words scattered like chaff behind them as Colton led the 4 children down the road, away from the mutters and the closed doors, toward the wide, open dark of the prairie. Stars wheeled above, bright as they had been when Lydia whispered her promise to her mother. And now, for the first time, that promise felt like it could be kept. And so the story closes not in grandeur, but in the quiet tread of boots across dust. A man and 4 children stepping together into a future no one else would give them. Sometimes family is not the blood we're born into, but the hands that reach for us when the world looks away. Remember this, dear listener, grace often walks in boots, and salvation sounds like a whisper. Come with me.